Right.
But we can go kind of old school, it's like get the kids out.
Yeah. Bye.
Bar
Yeah.
comes on, wash your hands, be at the dinner table.
Right. Hello. I guess there is that. Ben gets his own chair.
Committee member. It's not bad as the other day, I'm like, where's my phone? You know,
Oh.
after the park or park review. Here does Liz. Next to my chair.
We are.
Thanks, next week.
Okay.
Then ride my bike a little bit.
Oh, you rode your bike?
Yeah.
Here. That's great.
Walking the walk talk.
I'm just gonna go make sure
I
that
know.
Sue comes and knows where to go. Put the dinner table tonight because our kids will have to start. This is already recording and we're like,
Well. I'm the opposite from kids. No, getting my 13, 16-year-old out for a walk. Yeah. Yeah.
we should switch kids.
Yeah.
So I think we have two members that we know aren't on that, and one that maybe should. So we can go ahead and get started. Emily just wanted to check the doors and make sure they're still open. So we haven't met all of you, but I'm Amy Peterson, Community Development Director. Emily Shively, City Planner. Sam Burns is who typically emails you.
Yes.
He is home ill tonight, so
Oh.
we're covering. And Maria.
Yeah, I'm Maria Wardoku. Most of you virtually in January, but I work for Alta Planning and Design. And we do all kinds of walking and biking planning work all across the country. And I mostly work in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So we're helping out on this plan.
Yeah. So you can just run if you like.
Well, it seems like you all know each other. But maybe you can each just remind me.
Sure. I'm Isaac Curtis. I own Crankworks Bike Shop right down on Main Street, and I started the movie theater about 12 years. And worked in a bike shop prior to that, right downtown for 5 years prior to that. So River Falls and bikes are kind of my thing for as long as I can remember.
I'm Karen Wells and I work at UW River Falls with student organizations in the student union. And I've worked there for 18 years, which is like weird to me to say that out loud, and lived in this community. So I didn't grow up here and I didn't go to college here. But you know, this is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. So yeah, community member, and then I'm the UWRF rep.
I'm Anna Zaleski and I teach 4th grade here in our community. And I have 2 kids who are teenagers and we're just avid walkers, bikers. I did grow up here and yeah, just really love this community. So I'm really excited that we're setting aside that pedestrian bicycle and kind of looking just through that lens. I think that's fantastic.
I don't think introduce them.
Kid Kittleson, manager of rehab for the hospital here in town as well as in Hastings. And so I oversee physical therapy, occupational speech, cardiac therapy, and rehab. Been in the community for 15 years at the hospital and raised our girls here. And I used to walk to work every single day on the same path. I think my footprints are embedded in the path from my house to the hospital. So yeah, I'm avid outdoor and love to be on the community.
Oh. So this is what's on the agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about some of the community input we've received so far on the Focus River Falls efforts that goes beyond this plan to include the comprehensive plan and the parks and recreation plan. And then talk about the vision and guiding principles for this plan. And then most of it, or most of the slides are about the initial assessment of the biking and walking environment
And that's all kind of done with data that we that we gather from the city or that's publicly available. So that's kind of the lens that we have in the assessment, but then I really see a lot of value in you all, having worn your, footprints into the paths and river falls, like kind of checking that, does what we find just looking at data can meet what you observe about the community, and where can you kind of add more detail than what we've seen. And then we'll do some next steps. So just a reminder that the timeline and the exact times may shift, but generally for the bike and pedestrian plan, we have data collection, developing a goals and vision statement, doing the analysis for the plan, which is what we're going to be looking at today, and then drafting a plan that will get adopted by the city. So we're kind of right in here, plan analysis, finishing up that goals and vision. And that's more or less aligning with the other two plans that are going on. I don't know, Amy, do you have any additional insight about where things are with the other plans, or if that's aligning?
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan, we did our basic data collection, and we started the engagement process and have just started taking some of the initial engagement that we've received back and kind of trying to turn that into kind of the key themes, which will eventually turn into goals for the plan. So just entering that goals and vision stage for the comprehensive plan. The park and rec plan, they just completed the initial on the ground analysis last week of all of the parks and amenities. So that's going to go through staff review and then back out to the committee, similar to how this data is coming to you. Yeah, and we'll keep rolling with all of this until the beginning of 2023. So put a bow on it.
Excuse me, I have a question. This is Mike Noreen online. And maybe I missed it, but are we done with the data collection for the bike and ped plan?
I would say generally, yes. What we're doing from this point onward is kind of getting that nuance that community members and the steering committee can provide, and then doing our bike and walking tours. So in the sense that that's data collection, that's ongoing. But we have kind of the information about the roads and speeds and that kind of stuff already.
Great, thank you.
Great. And also, we didn't let you introduce yourself, I realized.
I was debating whether he was on or not.
I'm here. Mike Noreen. I am the Conservation and Efficiency Coordinator and City Forester for the City of River Falls. And I've lived here since 2007. And I have a wife and a couple of kids, and one's in college and one's in high school. And we lived on 4th Street, so we're really close to Greenwood and the middle school and my work. So we always either walked to school or rode a lot of bike and still do. I'm not much of a mountain biker these days, but I'm a pretty utilitarian biker, so I like to ride around a lot for work or to get to work, or just to get a little exercise or stress relief. So I bike a lot, and in that regard, I guess hopefully I can bring some value to this board or committee.
Great. We just realized we didn't have our virtual guest introduce himself, and we went over the time. So speak a little bit to the overall community engagement that's been happening. And
yeah, so we had the open house on February 24th. Were any of you able to go to that?
in-person one. Yeah, I think most folks were there kind of earlier in the day and then a snowstorm hit. And
Right.
most folks were like, oh, I think we'll just hang out at home. And then there was an online survey on EngageRF. Have any of you logged into EngageRF and seen that? So we had about 60 responses to that and a little over 100 people at the open house. So one of the questions that we asked was, help us come up with a vision statement. And so that was sort of Mad Lib style, kind of fill in the blank. So these were some that came out that were relevant to the bike ped plan. Sustainability came through in a lot of different activities in the open house and the survey. Also really thinking about having a vibrant downtown as that core of the community. First class outdoor recreation, something that, you know, the city would be known for, but needing to invest in the infrastructure to do that. Investing in celebrating health by investing in bike trails. And then again, that sustainability and infrastructure for that. And then another question that was asked is, as you think about the future of River Falls, what sort of concerns or issues do you think may pop out? And so the word cloud on the left captured a lot of what people were thinking. And so the larger the word, the more folks kind of hit on that theme. And a couple of things, again, relevant to the bike ped plan are sidewalk and trail infrastructure, like really wanting investment there and connectivity and accessibility. And then downtown again, popped out as important and core.
So this was another part of the community engagement, was asking, how do you currently move? What is your desired way to move? So the biggest thing that stands out to me is that people say, number one, they currently move by traveling alone in a personal vehicle, followed by walking and biking. And then people said they actually want to walk and bike more. So that really, I don't know, I guess to me, it affirms what we're doing with this plan, that people in the community wanted. And then I also noticed a few things looking through the survey and the in-person engagement results. People were asked what amenities do they look for when they are finding housing. And the top two were near parks and greenways and walkable, bikeable. People were asked about their favorite outdoor activities, and number one was walking, number two was biking, followed by hiking, and then running was also on the list. So kind of all those activities are making use of the biking and walking infrastructure. So yeah, just kind of throughout, although we only had a few questions that were specifically about this plan, biking and walking kept rising to the top in a lot of the responses. Before we do the vision, any thoughts about that community input or questions we have about what's been done so far with that?
I do have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Do we have Uber or Lyft? Any drivers in town?
Taxi service.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I know our students say we don't, or the
Right.
university students. And I always wonder why that is, and I've never investigated it.
Yeah.
Is it allowed? I mean, like,
Right.
is it allowed?
Right. Is there some reason or is it just not?
Yeah, I'm like,
Nobody's doing it, right?
yeah, somebody should.
Right. I think it's more than that, but I'm not. positive
Okay.
either.
I always assumed it wasn't allowed, like there was some ordinance or I don't know, I just assumed that, but interesting.
So we asked community members to take a look at the draft vision for the Bike and Pedestrian plan. And also the guiding principles, which we'll get to on the next slide. So that vision, we wrote up after our first meeting with all of you and reflecting on what you shared, and workshopped it a little bit with the city staff. So that's walking and biking are comfortable modes of transportation that connect people of all ages and abilities to one another and to everyday destinations via safe, accessible infrastructure. And then we asked members of the public, what do you think about that on a spectrum? So the spectrum is one I like to use. It's for consensus building. So we don't have to be binary, yes or no. We can be, well, it's okay, or have some room for that gray area. So the vision statement, it was pretty clear. People were supportive. I love it or I like it for most people. Then we looked at the guiding principles and had people do that same activity. So there's a memo detailing the goals and the guiding principles, and that was included in the packet that Sam sent out. So you have that information, but I'll share what the text was around accessibility. That was policy and infrastructure support the needs of people with barriers to accessing essential destinations using the existing car-oriented transportation system, such that people of all social and demographic backgrounds are equally able to meet their needs and participate in the community. So this one probably had more of a broad range of answers, but we're still seeing most people in kind of that consensus zone of from I love it to I can live with it and support it. Connectivity, that's about people can quickly access everyday destinations via walking and bicycling on accessible, pleasant, pollution-free facilities. So that's probably got the most love it of all of them. Health and safety is transportation systems proactively promote the comprehensive health and well-being of all community members through active transportation facilities that equitably connect users to key destinations. People clustering a little bit more, and I like it. And then the last two are sustainability and economic vitality. So sustainability is transportation systems are designed for the long run. They take into full account the environmental and financial benefits and costs of continuing to do business as usual versus implementing some different policies and infrastructure investments. And then economic vitality is that our active transportation and trail systems foster tourism and economic development. And I think that one, yeah, that one had nobody opposing it. So that's kind of interesting to see what themes kind of resonate with everybody.
Can you read the health and safety one? That's just that complete statement about that again.
Yeah. So it's transportation systems proactively promote the comprehensive health and well-being of all community members through active transportation facilities that equitably connect users to key destinations. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Thanks. Nope, just didn't hear all of it, so thanks.
Mm-hmm. So reflections on that, like, does the community feedback align with what you would expect? We're not talking to everybody in the community.
So just because I wasn't there, they were, that statement was delivered and then you decided.
So it was on a poster board. The statement was printed there, and then people had a dot that they could put.
Got it.
On the scale.
Sounds good.
Did you hear any verbal feedback from folks about why they weren't as convinced by the accessibility? Was there anything that you heard? I'm just thinking if that was the one that was the least well received, was there particular comments made, or, because that kind of surprises me that people wouldn't be more supportive of that.
Well, I
I
was
don't know if it
wondering,
was the phrasing, was something
Yeah.
about cars I heard, and I was like, I
Mhm.
wasn't sure what that.
I was wondering if maybe they put a dot somewhere because they're like, that's not happening in this town.
Oh,
That's kind, you know, that's why I was just curious.
That's how they
I'm like,
interpreted it.
Anyway,
Yeah, I didn't specifically.
Okay.
We were at, you were at a different station and I was kind of milling. I think Sam and Kendra were back at these stations more, so I didn't hear anything in particular.
Okay.
but-
Could you read that statement again?
Yeah.
Because I think I didn't understand the part that you said about the existing car. I can't remember what the line was.
Sure, yeah, so it's, first part of it is policy and infrastructure support the needs of people with barriers to accessing essential destinations using the existing car-oriented transportation system.
Okay.
So it is kind of, what is it right now? It is
Just
just, it feels,
existing, yeah.
what is it currently?
And then the other part is that people of all social and demographic backgrounds are equally able to meet their needs and participate in the community.
Well, and as we continue to do engagement around the plan, we can dig into some of these things a little bit further. So if there are questions that we have coming out of this initial engagement, there can be future opportunities to say, kind of maybe rephrase this or split those apart, or, you know, ask a different type of question to folks that get at maybe what is your current experience of, you know, moving around the city, and what barriers are you experiencing or that you are aware of other people experiencing, you know, and kind of ask those types of questions to flesh that out a bit. And, you know, because you also don't know, was it just like one part of it that they really liked, or
Right.
another part, or, you know, and how people interpret things, and like, you know, Maria said, this was just kind of a snapshot of a handful of people, so I think if things were like way on one side or way on the other side, then, and that was totally surprising, then we'd want to dig into that a little bit further. And so that's kind of how we assess what we're getting at this stage.
Would it be helpful if I printed the packet off for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
See what you.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, maybe I should have put the phrases up there too. I didn't want to do too many words, but I did a few words. So after this, we're gonna get into the analysis, and the results of that. So before we move on to that, anything else? Mike, I know it's hard to jump in virtually. You have anything else you want to talk about here?
Thanks for asking. No, good questions you guys are asking. It's some of those questions asked could be misinterpreted as present to what you want to see, but you guys are doing great.
Great. So, we did a couple of different analyses. The first one is called Live, Work, Play. It's basically about determining where is demand for walking and biking likely to be high. Because we can't just measure it from how many people are currently walking or biking, because usually the infrastructure isn't in place to support where people want to go. So we look at where do people live, where there are higher densities of people living close together, where do people work, where is their shopping, parks and trails, and then civic destinations. And so that's kind of a typical analysis that we do. And then I compared that against this question we asked in the public engagement, about what destinations do you currently walk or bike to? And it aligns pretty well with what we were looking at. So a lot of people said parks, downtown, UWRF, work, shopping, neighborhoods, kind of the top ones that came out. So pulling all those pieces together, this is the overall picture of what the data tells us about where we might expect demand for biking and walking in River Falls. So the darker color is higher and then green or where it's just transparent or where we would expect a little bit less. And then I'll show you each of these components that went into it. So when we look at where people live, population concentration, we're seeing the highest concentration over in this quadrant of the city. And seeing a lot of apartment buildings and some student housing. So that seems like that kind of aligns with what you would expect where the population density would be. Do you agree, Amy?
That's interesting.
Because you get some neighborhood growth that's out around those wheels on the edges. That's where, you're up into Stripping Ponds up there and you're out in Ivy Meadows. And
Right.
so that stuff is growing past this date.
But they're only single family.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or it's like Tom.
Yeah.
But like, right,
makes
if you
sense.
look at,
That's
right,
up
I
and
mean,
down
that's where
Main Street.
Rockbridge, where the school that I teach is, and there's a lot of apartment buildings,
It's
right?
up and down Main Street.
That's single family and that one popped. So it's interesting that the rest didn't.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, and so one of the limitations is the size of the census block group. So it could be that part of that, this block group kind of extends over there and you're getting a little bit of that reflected. So I'm actually going to just note that as something we might want to take a look at. Then if we look at jobs, we've got our higher concentration in the downtown. And then I think we're seeing some of the commercial development that's along the highway here.
Hospital.
Yeah.
In the high school.
And looking at retail jobs, which is how we estimate where people are shopping. That also has the highest concentration in the downtown area. Does this kind of reflect where you think of as places to shop?
So, yeah.
I don't know what the retail is at the high school.
No, I'm trying to figure that out.
Quick trip.
The new.
Yeah, but
The
that
new
one-
one, yeah.
Built.
It was
Wasn't
built
there
2019.
Yeah.
So Maria, when we were doing the data collection for the community profile for comp plan, SRF pulled it all together, sent it to staff. We were able to kind of look through it and provide feedback. Were you anticipating doing that with this data as well? Or is this our chance right now to do that or?
I think as much feedback as you can give right now, that would be great. I went through it with Sam. But yeah, if things are sticking out to you, I think it's great to just share it now.
Okay.
Well, I will add that that does look kind of questionable because it is the high school and then maybe the hospital. I mean, what are you shopping? What is out there on the east side? So I guess if it's our time to question it, that seem legit.
This one.
Like
looks
sporting
like-
events and games and stuff like that. Like sporting events, football games.
Yeah.
I mean, people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, they're spending their money, I guess it would
Buying
be.
tickets.
Someone shopping.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, you may not think of it as shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're
essentially like downtown going to the movie theater.
Right.
Same thing, different story.
And we're looking for where people have jobs that we would consider to be retail.
Right,
So it's kind of a proxy for,
sure, right.
for shopping.
So where was the university on that last?
Held it in with downtown
Okay.
on the last slide. Oop. No, one back. Yeah.
Tail.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing,
They
but
lost a
figuring
little bit.
names,
Yeah.
Yeah, we were having that conversation today where there's a big separation between campus and the community. Like, community folks don't understand, they can like go to the university and buy Herberts and Gerberts, and I never see high school students there. And I don't know what high school students do in this town.
Right.
And I, anyway, it's interesting. So like you're saying, like, nobody really, goes there, but that's another conversation for another time.
Okay, so looking at parks and trails. We gave a little bit more weight to the parks that have amenities. Assuming that attracts a few more people to come. Does that look about right?
So the bike trail up there,
Yeah, right, yeah.
yeah, and that's
Do
just,
we see at like Glen Park, do you see mostly in-towners or residents there, or does that bring?
access to the canyon, does anybody access it right there? for
Yeah, that's kind
kayaking
of,
Oh my gosh, a ton of cars, yeah, from Minnesota.
From Minnesota,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
in the summer, there's a lot
Yeah.
of people
And I
coming,
know
especially now
certainly-
that it's been rebuilt and is easier access, better
Sure.
parking, I
Yeah.
feel like in the summers, there's a lot of.
'cause I know at least the bike trails, there's, so like a youth team,
Mhm.
there's a lot of like the Hastings, team will come and practice one day a week up there, or Woodbury or something like that. So I know you get a lot of out of towners there. So I don't know if that's something that's addressed later on is, okay, so residents tend to kind of come together in these parks. And these parks tend to be blended with out of towners or residents.
Like Hoffman, maybe regularly is mostly folks in town, but you get a baseball game.
The
Yeah,
events,
yeah.
right, yeah, right.
More of a regional draw.
Is there a sense with people who come from out of town that they kind of park their car at the park, experience it and go home, or there's more, coming into the community, doing other things? And maybe you don't know, but.
I don't really know.
I would guess it's mountain biking, right? And they stay out there. And then
Kayaking.
kayaking, and
Or
they
fishing.
fishing.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that.
We always hope for the latter.
Yeah,
We don't
right.
know how much we get exactly. So during the Kinney Corridor Plan, I think they did do analysis on like the fishing aspect, and I can't remember if it was the kayaking aspect too, from an economic perspective, so we can maybe pull that information. I don't know that we necessarily have it for like Cork.
What I like about this one though is you have a pretty even distribution about this too.
Yes.
That's what I like about it. It's not just heavy, super heavy down on one end or, so you're looking at needs kind of all around the entire area.
It's interesting to me though, that the two core neighborhoods, the older neighborhoods on each side of downtown are kind of deserts.
Right, the parks in the neighborhood, right?
I would like to add, the baseball park probably shouldn't be forgotten in terms of bringing outside residents in, come and play and spend money.
Yep.
So like what you were saying, the deserts right on either side of Main Street, are there any parks in that area? I mean, there's the one on the other side of the old police station. There's basically, and it's labeled as a park, but there's, I think, the picnic table.
Picnic table.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Picnic
Next to
table
a parking lot.
It's not like we can just grow a park there overnight type of deal.
Yeah.
But
And there
then
are
you
the
get-
schools. I mean, I think for
Yeah.
families with young kids, you can go to play,
Yeah.
you know, there's kind of that
Even
meeting.
just the, yeah, the big old open parking lot at the middle
Right.
school.
Would that be reflected in this, or that's a different data set?
No,
Schools?
that'll be in the, actually, the next one is the civic destination.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is looking at schools, college campuses. We have, of course, UWRF, and then I believe there's also like a technical college. That's kind of fun. And included churches, libraries, city services, this building. And does that feel about right, or? Anything there?
Unless the city services were too little to be on the map, they're not there. City Hall or the library.
I was gonna say, yeah, it doesn't look like that includes the library.
And there are some churches up near the library, so that, you know, again, if we're looking at more in that category. Pick up a few more.
Yeah, the downtown should be on for churches, because that's.
Yeah.
Quite a few, yeah.
I wonder if UWRF
Yeah.
is just like
Big.
dominating it and.
Yes, that's kind of what it looks like.
Okay.
In proximity there, there's quite a few churches right by EW, so.
Sure.
It makes sense, that part.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe extend it up north of it there.
Okay.
Police station's not on there, but they just moved. Not too long ago. So.
This is all 2019 data, correct?
I think this is all from, for the civic destinations, it's the city's data on where the schools are and where the city services are. So,
So, yeah, so our data may not be totally comprehensive either. You have to input to this.
so that's the whole demand analysis. Those are the 5 different components that went into that overall map. And the next analysis is about equity. So any other things we want to talk about?
I'm gonna go back to that composite map. and-
Sure.
Yeah, so we can kind of see how it's all just get together.
Of course, seeing WRF show up, this more densely populated area. And the downtown kind of our,
Yeah, and the hospital in Hoffman Park, have another node. Whitetail, yeah.
Is that all the way on the west, the sort of northwest corner?
Industrial park up there.
No, sorry, below, sort of in the main, yeah, but that little, what's that, can I figure that out?
Sorry,
The same
West
this?
Side
Oh, it's west side,
West side.
okay, I was thinking west side was further, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
okay, so the equity analysis looks at a bunch of different factors. And I'll actually go forward and show this and we'll go back to the map. So we pull together these different dimensions of equity. They mean different things to different people. So we're trying to create a comprehensive index that kind of pulls these pieces together. So we have opportunity and accessibility. And in that category, we're looking at households that don't have a vehicle. As well as childhood opportunities and wealth. So it's kind of looking at social mobility and where are the places where Basically, children are, born into low income families and they stay low income as adults. Environmental justice looks at air quality and tree canopy coverage. And then for health and safety, we're looking at coronary heart disease prevalence as an indicator. Affordability is housing cost burden. So how much of your income are you spending on housing? If it's a really high percentage, then we consider that to be a burden. And then a large chunk of it is what we kind of broadly call vulnerability. So this is more demographic based, where there are populations of color, people who are living in poverty, people who have a high school diploma or less education, and then youth and senior populations. So we, this is kind of our standard way of looking at equity. We put weighting on each of the factors. So they don't all go into it equally. So using our standard weighting, this kind of the map that we come up with the highest priority equity areas being in the darkest colors. And one thing to note is that because this is a smaller population area, some of the data that the census tract is bigger than the city. So we're just showing that here, like this little corner, to get that little corner of River Falls, most of that census tract is big and rural and goes way out. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. So back to, what I said about, we kind of look at what did the data tell us? And then for some pieces, it doesn't get really granular. So if
Would you mind going back to the percentage page?
Yeah.
And then I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So let's look at vulnerability. What do those percentage numbers mean? So like if we look at poverty, does that mean 25% of River Falls is in poverty, or?
Thanks for asking about that. So what we put up there, the numbers are how much weight we're giving that factor in importance.
Gotcha.
How
Okay.
important that is.
Yeah, so poverty is counting for 25% of the
That
weight.
makes sense now. Okay, thank you.
And the darker.
I have a question as well, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you go back to that last slide as well? So on a couple of them, canopy coverage and housing cost burden, this is the answers that you're receiving from the respondents. Is that how you're getting the info, or is there some other way?
So these are all national data sets. So not from any one individual, it's not from the community engagement or anything like that.
Okay, all right, I get it.
But it would be looking at canopy coverage from a larger area. I mean, it's not gonna go street by street, like, oh, this is about 50. Okay. Which is, yeah, and so the map then, the darker colors, does that say high priority? Is that what that's?
Yeah, highest priority.
Okay, yeah. So if we're looking at a darker color, that's likely to be problematic in one of those ways in the previous slide. So like, I mean, or maybe problematic isn't a good word. Identified as a need, an area of need in one of those categories. Okay.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing the area around UWRF showing up, and I think that's going to be related to students and
I think I mentioned that area, just so the lighter colored area where we saw a higher population density, most of that area on the southwest is pretty walkable, pretty walkable. I mean, your new neighborhood, right? You know, But the area, the darker area on the eastern side, we have a lot of folks who live in the trailer park and the housing development, the apartments there, and it's not very walkable. So that was just something that I share that concern, that that's an area that doesn't have great access to parks and doesn't feel very safe, walking or biking on Cemetery is kind of their, main access.
Cemetery or even
Yeah.
Lawson. or
Right,
Lawson,
yeah,
either
right,
place.
yeah.
You got Wildcat.
Crossing
or
Lawson
Columbus.
as a kid, like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Maria, for the census tracts that flow outside of the city, is it true for me to think that the bulk of that data is coming because of the township and not because of the city?
I'd have to know more about where exactly the population density is, but if you know, for example, that, nobody is living in this area, or it's very, very few people, and there's a township over here, then yes, I would assume if it's kind of at the edges of the city, it could be, that's more the township. But it's
Those two second darkest areas, to me, we don't have huge populations in either one, so I just have to wonder how much the towns are skewing this.
yeah.
And so the data you get for this, it's at that census level, not you can't really get it refined down to any less of that. Because I know some of the data, you can't get that specific.
Yeah, so it's more aggregated. It's at that census tract level because it's available nationally. So, yeah, I guess that's why we wouldn't only rely on this. It kind of gives us one window into it. But so we might ultimately use these different analyses to prioritize and say, we want to see, example, sidewalk connectivity improvements in this part of town as the top priority, because we can't do every improvement all at once. So when we do that, we want to be factoring in things like, well, this area maybe we don't really want to prioritize it because the need for that, the equity need is in the township and not in the community. So we'll want to keep that in mind as we apply the analyses, just that there's those extra pieces. And I'm not going to go through each one of these indicators, but I wanted to share a couple of them. So this is the populations of color. So in our this dark blue, we have greater than 10% in those areas. Zero vehicle households. We can see the university area and this neighborhood as well are showing up as greater than 12% of households don't have a vehicle. Does anyone have any insight as to like this area, why that might show up?
There's new apartment, I think that's right along Main there, but it's new apartment stuff that's right behind Katie there, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, I'm trying
Oh, just north of downtown there, okay.
Yeah.
So is that
Is it
main
these?
division?
These?
Yeah.
Right.
It's right here. I need like little.
I know.
You are.
Right, so that's straight line across that division.
Is it
That's gotta be division, right?
Is it right here?
Yeah,
Right there.
Yeah.
These
The
new
senior
apartments,
housing, right,
Yeah.
or senior apartments, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
I think, but
right? Are we looking at that
that's
right? Amy?
division, right?
We don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We're glad there's here.
Right.
It's City Hall and everything surrounding it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
Well, and we did hear from the developer, because they're proposing another project in town, that they have excess parking at those apartments, that they have some underground spaces that aren't utilized. You know, and it's in a location that,
Got it.
you know, is fairly walkable
Right.
to Christian services,
Right,
or
that was
even
part
if
of
you're
the
living in a
idea.
neighborhood, walking to school and, you know, those kinds of things. So maybe having part into the central. Still may be a hardship. Not have a car, it may not be by choice.
I can't believe the township is 12% for greater that don't have vehicles, but.
That does seem really surprising.
They're good walkers.
Heck of a walk.
Moped.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what would trigger that,
Are there any
unless
communities-
comforts of home is providing the strongest pull for that whole township quadrant.
Could be with senior housing.
down here?
Yeah.
That's where- yeah.
Oh,
Right.
that's a good guess, yeah.
Could be, yeah, if it's really low population in the rest of the
Right.
areas.
Yeah.
But for that populate, it's like, that's weighting pretty heavy for just that little thing,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Not the little thing, I'm just saying.
Right.
Compared to the rest of the
Yeah.
township.
The township did show up on other equity, you know, all the equity indicators combined too, so there may be up there.
And then this one wasn't part of the weighting, but just to provide some additional context, we also looked at the renter population. And the darkest areas are where greater than 60% of people are renting. So from what we just talked about with apartments and with UWRF, that's the areas making sense to me.
Yep, and the greater population density.
Let's save it for the equity analysis. Anything you want to revisit or? The next two, there are two more analyses. No, you're like, when is this gonna end? But the first one is about level of traffic stress. And then the last one is crashes. So it's getting more into the characteristics of the roadways. So getting into that, I wanted to kind of frame it with what we heard in the community engagement about what are people's barriers to walking and biking for transportation. So the top one that came across in community engagement was infrastructure, followed by safety, connectivity, and then improved crossings. So these are still kind of infrastructure. And then we see winter maintenance, having access to bikes. For a couple people came up. And it just
Maybe we should do a blue bike program.
So I was looking at data on how people move in River Falls, and I saw that about 40,000 trips start and end in the city every day. And almost all of them are under 4 miles. It's vast majority, and then 65% are under 1 mile. So there are just tons of short trips. There's like huge potential for people to be walking and biking for everyday needs. You know,
Or on a bus.
Right.
It's another conversation for another time.
You think of all those trips of mom and dad taking kids, sitting in line, dropping them off. I mean, we talk about blue zones like in Albert Lee, Minnesota, where they do walking buses, and I mean, it's a whole other conversation, but I mean, that's a huge data pull right there, just that piece of it. I think the community would be really surprised at that.
Where did that come from, Maria?
that is from Replica, which is a platform that models transportation across the whole US. When I'd be happy to to share more about that. But they're able to estimate the trip lengths and also the mode of transportation people are using. And that comes from data like from people's cell phones. That's it's anonymous, you know, by the time I say I'm seeing, I'm not seeing anybody's individual trip, but it kind of comes from that and from census and piecing that together. Yeah. People are watching. But what they found is that less than 40% of the trips are made by walking and biking. So even though it's like 98% are less than, of the trips are less than 4 miles, we're still seeing that the majority of the trips people are driving their cars.
Do we know why that is? Is it because laziness? Is it because capacity? You get the whole family, you're driving them off at sporting events or cargo as far as shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cultural. It's what we do.
I think that showed up when we were talking earlier about the survey results, whereas people drive, walk and bike, but they would really like to walk, you know, so it seems like there's some interest there, but some of the things that are shown here is the barriers, weather, infrastructure, you know, so safe crossings, safe infrastructure.
We just don't have mass transit. We just don't have it. People would use it, not everybody, but a lot of the percentage of the 4 mile. And I'm just speaking on behalf of university students too. If they had a shuttle, and then middle and high school student, anyway. Yeah, we just don't have any other options.
And a few things that came up in the survey that aren't reflected here, people talked about having kids and things to haul around as being something that's a barrier. And they also said, oh, there's little availability of rideshare, and winter weather is also a barrier. So we'd never expect that 100% of the short trips are going to be converted to walking and biking because there's myriad things going on in people's lives. But it does seem possible that it could be more than it is right now. And some of the things that people have said are things that we can do something about. You know, the winter weather, not so much, but winter maintenance, you know, that's something we can do. Improving crossings, improving safety, having more better trails, you know, it's all, there's a lot we can do. And I think River Falls is such a great, there's just so much opportunity because there's some population density, there's destinations close together, there's a grocery store, multiple grocery stores, that, you know, sometimes when we're doing plans in communities, they don't have a grocery store. So they can't, it's just off the table that people could walk or bike to do things like that. So I do think River Falls has a lot in place already that that if we can just connect to it better.
Would there be any way to incentivize something like that? Like have a contest, like if you log this many miles on your bike or you rode your bike to work X amount of days versus driving a car. I don't know what that would look like or if it's possible, but because sometimes people just need cattle prep in the butt to change. I'm guilty of it. I drove from my shop 100 yards away to Holiday for a coffee this morning and drove back. So it's just kind of a thing. It's probably could have got there faster by walking or jumping on one of the 100 bikes in my store. But so yeah, so tomorrow we'll get coffee.
Well, I think there's also some low hanging fruit with infrastructure. So like one thing I know on some other committees that I've been a part of with some of you and Mike, An example I'll use is, you know, I just think in front of your shop, we should take 2 parking spots and they should be fenced in for parking bikes. Because when I bike downtown with my.
They took away the bike rack that you.
Yeah.
I was like,
literally, I'm
what,
like, kidding.
where do I park my bike?
That's a barrier, like, seriously, it has been a barrier where I'm like, where do we take our, you know, and I know we could like lock up, but I'm just thinking, we have a bike shop downtown
Yeah.
and it's
Not very
2 parking
right.
spots that would be off
I
line.
do have a lot of customers coming with broken bikes that they cannot physically ride in their vehicle.
Mhm.
And if they have to park in the parking lot across the road.
So you want a spot in front of your shop? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so right now in front of my shop, there is a no parking zone.
Mhm.
Kind of my regular customers know that as that's where I park to drop my broken bike off, and that's where I park.
So then the one up above, the one then next to it, could that be fenced off?
Potentially, but then you might have to talk to Michelle.
Yeah, right.
It's 1 parking spot,
Mhm.
1.
I get it.
Downtown.
I know, a bunch of downtown businesses though, that.
Yeah,
the same.
Well, not.
They
Those
thought
are
it was
hot
the same.
commodities.
But it's things that can come out of this plan that can be adopted that we can implement in the future, and then
Yeah.
we've got the backbone to be able to do it.
Totally, but that's just an example of like a low hanging fruit, accessibility, you know, like a.
I think some of the downtown businesses might be excited about promoting biking. I mean, I'm thinking of like Fuller's Grocery for sure would be, you know, if there was, but they were kind of promoting that we've improved the infrastructure and there's
Yeah.
now better.
Foxton or
Foxton,
might be willing
right.
down with a spot
Right.
in front of their shop being
Yeah.
fenced.
Right. I'm
Because
just thinking
lacrosse has a
it could
good
be
example of it.
Something that they would promote to their
Yeah.
customers too, like we're trying to.
Back to the incentive piece, like ride your bike to my business and
Right.
receive 5% off your purchase every Saturday.
Can I add a little something on the bike racks? The one like across from Isaac's place in the middle of Main Street. And when we had the Blue Bike program, we did receive some feedback of like, that's not a good spot for a bike
Not
rack
good.
because
Yeah.
kids are
I
going
agree.
to and fro. So I miss, it's a good place for a bike rack for most people, maybe not for everybody. It could be attractive to,
Kids, you
I
know.
don't know, younger kids, but I don't
Veterans
know.
Park, is there anywhere
Yeah,
in Veterans Park? I mean, especially with music in the park,
right.
people just kind of lean it up against the building
Right.
and lay it down.
Space for-
So I don't own that building, but there is, I'm assuming some sort of easement. I don't know if Veterans Park goes all the way up to the wall. But that may be something I can contact her and put a pad there and cement pad and a bike rack or something. So that way you get access to the park,
Yeah,
wet pathway.
I like that idea. Keep it on that side of Main Street. Maybe
Yeah.
look for something on that side of Main Street than the east, you know, for families biking downtown, would there be some place to put your bikes that you don't have to cross Main Street, you know, is the idea.
And I know there's big obnoxious pedestrian crossing flashing lights like on the university.
Yeah.
Sometimes go
Yeah.
off for no reason.
I had that in my notes. That's a problem. It's not good.
Something
no. Yeah.
on maybe these 3 blocks of Main Street similar to that,
Yeah.
because I mean, like my UPS guy, he just closes his eyes and goes for it. He's like, you gotta go, otherwise nobody, I've sat there and 15, 20 cars will go by and they'll look at you, wait, but they won't stop for it.
Yeah, the students brought up exactly what you're saying.
Sure.
The crosswalks in town should have the flashing lights.
Mm-hmm.
But those I don't know who designs these things, but you should push it. You should push it and have it flash. There shouldn't be an auto flash. Because if those suckers flash all the time when people aren't. So now it's like a cry wolf thing. Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, that was something that a committee of students brought up today.
Okay.
What you're saying, they would like to see the crosswalks downtown, especially the really weird freaky one, they would say by Family Crash.
Yes.
Yes.
They're like, we hate that thing. We don't ever we're like darting around. Anyway, that's a really freaky one.
And then maybe Lawson to Hoffman Park.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But there's no sidewalk there, but yeah, once we get a sidewalk in, then let's.
Your data's gonna show that needs, I mean, it's what it's showing, talking about, and for that takes us into that next phase of implementation of what are those ideas of low-hanging fruit, those things that would be safety results?
Yeah, so I guess I can share a little bit more about what we heard in the data, and then we can use, I think, most of the rest of the time to keep generating some ideas about those initial recommendations, because that's maybe the next phase. So our level of traffic stress analysis looks at kind of 4 different levels of biking. So it's called BLTS, bicycle level of traffic stress. And it ranges from a score of 1 to 4. 1 is roadways where we'd expect that bicyclists of all ages and abilities feel comfortable riding. And so that can look like fully separated paths. It could also look like a pretty calm residential street. BLTS 2 is slightly less comfortable. Most adults might feel comfortable riding. So you don't have any buffered bike lanes in River Falls, but that would be the type of thing where you're maybe still on a major roadway, but you have some more space. So probably kids not as comfortable, but most adults. BLTS 3 is moderately uncomfortable, where if you're an experienced bicyclist, you might tolerate it. So that could be just a simple painted bike lane on a multi-lane street. And then BLTS 4, this is high stress. These roadways are places where only if you are a strong and fearless bicyclist, you are going to tolerate it. So looking at that for River Falls, red is BLTS 4, so that's the most stressful. And then kind of an orange for 3, and teal for 2, and then the lowest stress is 1. So there are a lot of residential streets that we would expect to be fairly calm. And again, this is just from what we can tell by the number of lanes, the speed limit, whether there's a bike lane, and whether there's a shared use path. There might be some other factors that you know about that don't show up there. But we see basically Main Street and part of Division. This part of Division does have a bike lane on it, I believe. So it's showing that there's a little bit lower stress.
I just parked in there for practice today. It seems like is that kind of in between the elementary school and out in there?
I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, it says bike lane. It's the
Right.
only place that says bike lane, but everybody parks there.
Parking, yeah, right. So that's in green.
Greenwood?
Greenwood, yeah.
Well,
Greenwood
it's
to
not-
Hoffman.
but
Yeah.
Lemonade.
Yes.
I
Amy
know that
or
this is
Emily?
Yes.
I have a question about that bike lane on was it Division in front of Hoffman that we're talking about? Is that really a bike lane, or did I had heard a story that someone just went and painted it?
They did a good job.
I don't even have a bike. It doesn't
Yeah,
have a bike or anything, it's just a
So
bike.
you've got more history here than
Used
both
to say
Emily
bike.
and
Did it?
I. I don't know the history of it. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think any of our painted bike lanes are actually what we would consider official, or I don't want to say to code, but to standards. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed your shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, LTS 4.
Yeah.
Situation.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
bike plans that were done in the circa 1995, like our bike plan, I mean, they thought that was fine at the time. And so that was kind of how they were defining things, and yeah.
And as a person who biked a lot with young kids, I feel like the diciest places, and I'm sure this is true everywhere, are intersections, right? So if you're, it's like, we live by the university and trying to get to Glen Park you know, as a bicyclist, I would try to stay on the road because that's what we're supposed to do, not bike on sidewalks, right? So I'm biking on Cascade, which is stressful. And then I'm trying to turn left onto Main Street. And by turning left with two small children, you know, you're like pulled out into the lane of traffic. That was very stressful.
And the lights don't acknowledge.
Right, yeah, then you're waiting there, then you send one of your kids over to push
I
the
know.
button so that you can actually get a high stop. Right, yeah,
What
right.
about- So is this, that yellow strip there, is that Cascade going past the university?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that sidewalk that's disconnected.
Yeah.
When it's summertime, students,
Right.
it's a great place to ride a bike,
Mhm.
but when you got students and stuff,
Right,
I don't really
dangerous.
think
Right,
walkers and bikers don't coexist wonderfully, even,
yes.
the pathway. It's not white pathway anymore, is it?
It's the
Kinnick
Trails.
Okay. Okay. But even that one coming around the corner, whenever I'm riding the bike, I feel like I've got to go really slow and cautious and make sure there's nobody walking.
Yeah.
And what location did you say it was?
The university, Cascade, and then Kinnick pathway.
Mike, wasn't Cascade supposed to have a bike lane and it got a little bit, yeah. There's like a fake bike lane.
It kind of does, it
It's a
just goes away
shoulder.
in the roundabout and then you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a minute now. Right, but there's nothing, you know, I'm just in the traffic just when I need a bike lane, you know?
Yeah, so the yellow part is the piece of Cascade that was rebuilt
Mhm.
from Main to Sixth, and Sixth East has not been rebuilt yet.
Right.
Okay.
And then that nice wide walking pathway, once you get to the corner kind of by Lawson, it pinches down to a really narrow old sidewalk.
Yes.
That was always a little bit of a pinch point. Right, with the kids.
Right. So Cascade and Wasson will be rebuilt in a couple of years. Wasson's gonna be rebuilt, but we're gonna get a roundabout at Cascade and Wasson. So that intersection at least will get,
Right.
And a trail on Watson, I believe, too.
it'll get rebuilt, yeah, the one that's there.
So we also looked at this from the perspective of people walking. So it's kind of similar from 1 to 4, where 4 is high stress, used by adults without mobility challenges who have limited route choices. So it's kind of like, well, if I have to walk there, make it happen. And then down to PLTS 1, which is people of all ages and abilities would feel comfortable walking and would require little like attention to traffic. And then 2 and 3 are kind of in the middle of that. So again, we look at number of lanes, speed limit. We also look at presence of sidewalks. And then because River Falls actually has great data on trees, we were able to look at presence of trees buffering the sidewalk from the roadway. So some similar things pop out. We've got Division, Main, Cascade, again, as a little bit more stressful. We're also showing all those walkways at the university. Right? So there's that kind of cluster there. I think the variation that we tend to see between like level 1 and level 2 is more about that presence of trees, presence of sidewalk. So what's nice to see is that there's a lot of what we would assume are lower stress roadways. And then like you were talking about with Main Street and the UPS guy closes his eyes and just goes for it. Like, we have a lot of great places to walk or calm places to walk, and then you're gonna hit a barrier. So the last analysis is about crashes. So you can kind of see that crashes are going to align with some more stressful roads. The first map shows all of the crashes that have happened in River Falls. So that includes vehicle only crashes. And that's been a little over 900 crashes over a 5-year period, 2017 to 2021. So weighting those by how severe they were, we're showing in the blue, that's going to be more severe, blue and green. Yellow is just cars and property damage only. So looking at vehicles, vehicle only crashes make up most of the crashes that happen in River Falls. And the vast majority of those are property damage only. And then you've got some where there's a possible injury. So this is kind of assessed by the police officer at the time. So perhaps that person does have an injury, perhaps they don't. About 7% there was a non-incapacitating injury. So that means that they were able to walk away. So maybe they have whiplash, maybe they have, they could have like a broken bone or something, but they're able to walk away. And then less than 1% is an incapacitating injury. What's awesome is that there were no fatal crashes. So that is really great. When we look at the pedestrian involved crashes, compared to vehicles, it's far fewer crashes, 18 crashes, and these are the ones that are reported. So if it happened and it wasn't reported, we don't know about it. And that does tend to happen more for crashes where people are walking and biking. So that's something to know. So the pattern in terms of how severe the crashes are is really different from the vehicle only crashes. We have one crash where it was considered to be property damage only. All of the rest of them, it was possible injury or incapacitating or non-incapacitating injury. So, compared to less than 1% in vehicle crashes where somebody's going away, having to be carried off in a stretcher, it's 22% of the pedestrian crashes. And our top crash locations are along Cascade and especially along Main Street. Looking at the bicycle crashes, it was eight crashes, all of them possible injury or non-incapacitating injury. And again, they were on Cascade and Main Street, which showed up as our higher level of traffic stress. So that's, I think that kind of covers all of the analyses that we did. Any thoughts on the crashes? Does this fit with what you would think, or?
I'm surprised it's not more. Just my feelings as a,
Vehicles or pedestrians or?
well, all of it.
All of it?
Like as someone who walks, bikes and drives and
There's a lot of, oh gosh.
rides,
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah,
yeah.
near misses.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable to me. I thought it would be much higher. But I also feel like it's probably not much higher. Like I would know, but anyway, I just am surprised overall that it doesn't happen more.
There used to be, so like Sterling Ponds County Road, used to be a way to get across the highway there, correct? That's been, I think somebody got hit on a bike and
Yeah,
killed.
they closed that cross. You could get into that business area right across there.
Yeah,
Then
and then
they nixed that. We can nix that.
Yeah.
I just too much speed there right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get across quickly.
Over by the hospital.
Customer the
That
other
was
day.
probably one of the best changes ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a customer the other day, he was complaining of, it's a pain in the butt, he lives in Sterling Ponds, he's got to go all the way up to the roundabout and overpass, and I said, yeah, but they got like whacked out there. He goes, well, I just kind of play Frogger and I do it anyways. Vehicles are going fast there, and I think it was a good thing to get rid of that. But a lot of people, again, I think it's the laziness in people that don't short mile up and over when they're not close.
From the data that we're looking at today, it seems to me like there's a couple different areas. We've got people that are going to destination, which is downtown, and that's congestion, that's cars, that's people. We know that that data is gonna be that way, so that just confirms it. But then you also look at your recreational folks that are gonna be tending to maybe not go out, they're gonna be more on the periphery of that destination area too. So I think we're kind of looking at two different groups. Kind of.
So question, are you guys going to look at the potential for additional multi-purpose trails? Or do you think that's gonna come through the outdoor rec?
I think we'll have to figure out exactly how that shakes out since the outdoor plan is happening at the same time, but we would definitely be collaborating on that. You know, I would expect that would be part of what we're thinking about.
So I continue to think about connections for more regional trails, like in Stillwater. That could happen here. And defining where those locations could be, or getting those in one of the plans as an opportunity, I think could help River Falls from a long-range recreation perspective.
Are you talking about bike trails?
Yeah, well, multi-purpose.
Multiple.
You know,
like paved.
on the Brown Creek Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prescott just did one to Hastings and then links into
Yeah.
the Hastings Trail System.
Yeah,
And
that's
Stillwater, which connects to everything in the cities.
yeah.
Sunday ride up to Hudson to grab coffee or whatever,
Yeah.
vice versa.
Our
Hudson
family
over
has
to
done
River
that a lot.
Falls.
We've done just, and we don't have, right, like fancy bikes at all, but we enjoy biking, but it does feel like you're sort of, this is the way I should go, and like, I'm not, you know, right, that'd be great to have a trail that would connect that.
Well, that's kind of the next thing. So that's the next phase of the plan, is to think about recommendations development. So we've already had some, I've been taking notes of the different ideas you already have about this. So part of that is developing the network recommendations. So that would be recommending low stress facility types and identifying some project segments. So we're trying to get more of the network to be level of traffic stress 1 or 2, so more people feel comfortable biking, walking. And then the other part of recommendations development, people shared a few ideas around this already, but it's education, encouragement, evaluation, program and policy recommendations. So all the things that aren't the infrastructure, but like you were talking about with incentives, bike parking kind of falls a little bit, you know, sort of infrastructure, sort of a program. But other ideas around how we can educate people about rules of the road, or even about what recreational facilities are available in River Falls. So that's the next step, and our next meeting will be really all about that. So we'll probably have some ideas to present to you about what recommendations could be. And one thing we're going to do in the meantime is to keep engaging people on Engage River Falls on that online platform. So we have the opportunity to put up some kind of interactive map, and I wanted to see what questions you think we should ask at the stage we're in now.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about that low stress situation, or the stress levels.
Yeah.
I feel like there are several spots around town that have like bursts of high stress. So schools would be one of them. So I know so many people that I tell I'm on this committee, and they're like, oh my gosh, fix the high school because it is scary, you know, like for the kids walking and biking, but it only happens for those 15 minutes every school morning, you know, when it's in the dark. And like Glen Park used to feel scary when there was swimming lessons, and that's gotten a lot better, I think, with the new design. But I'm just thinking of parks at, times when there would be a park and rec activity or, like events at Hoffman Park, just where suddenly now being a pedestrian feels unsafe or, being a bicyclist, you know what I'm saying? So it's not all the time every day, but just sort of those places that, sometimes under some conditions don't feel safe.
I feel high stress, when it's, the school buses are, and it's not the direct, I mean, this has nothing to do with any one person.
Yeah.
But when their routes involve high traffic areas that don't have sidewalks.
Yes.
I think that's such a concern of mine, and I've seen it around town, and I'm like, oh, and then it's winter.
Like past your house, your old house,
Yeah.
right, going
That's-
toward Cascade.
I would
Like
like
you
take
have
so many
trucks.
videos and so many.
School buses and parent traffic, and
There's
emergency
cars,
traffic, and
there's-
kids walking that don't have
No
sidewalks.
sidewalks, snowbanks,
Yes,
cars
snowbanks.
parked, kids walking,
Right.
buses, and I'm like, oh, this is so bad, it's so bad.
But it looks like a quiet neighborhood on your map, because it is a quiet neighborhood, right? I mean, except those
Between 2:30 and 3
today.
Don't let your dog out or your children.
Right.
Yeah, so it is interesting that it like,
So I'm just thinking maybe give special attention to the areas around, I mean, I'm sure we will, around schools, around
Yeah.
parks, and knowing that those have kind of those special circumstances.
Are you gonna share on this interactive map, kind of some of the things we looked at? Where you're gonna use some of that data and highlight things for people to see, to help them navigate what they're actually trying to do, you know what I mean? So give them some of that,
Okay.
information to,
React to it.
it was good, I
Yeah,
mean, that's good
right.
information to see. Not everybody's aware of what are the hot zones of this town, but I mean, you should know, but I mean, not everybody is. And what is that interaction and how do they, so when you're getting into those questions asked. Are those good?
Well, I think
I have
that's on. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. I have a question for Isaac and maybe the bigger group too, with electric bikes and how, if they're taking off, I mean, just in a big city and they're everywhere. And if that's factored into this at all. I'm done.
Yeah, electric bikes, if I break it down, there's 3 classes of electric bikes. You've got class 1. I'm gonna skip over class 2 and call it class 3. So class 1 it's really considered a normal bike. It won't go beyond 20 miles an hour, which most everybody can do that. And there's no throttle. You can't just push a button and go. Pick your legs up and go. You have to be pedaling. As soon as you hit the brake or stop pedaling, it shuts off. We go to, again, skip class 2 and we go to class 3. Exact same thing, but it will assist you up to 28 miles an hour. Most people, and that's a small majority of bikes, that's for the commuter. Like when I lived in Hammond and I commuted to town here. Point A, point B, back roads, just as fast as you can. Class 2 is kind of the naughty list. We don't sell any of these in our shop. Technically, and again, there's nobody out there policing it, but technically you gotta be 16 years old, valid driver's license. It kind of falls into that 50cc scooter. Yeah, so you don't need to have license plates or horns and blinkers or anything, but it does have a throttle. It's very easy to bypass go into the settings and bypass the speed regulator limiter. So yeah, you can just treat it as a scooter, push and go. So you see overseas or in bigger cities where they do have people who hold you accountable at trailheads or on the path, they can say, hey, let's check the bike. If it's got a throttle or if it's class 2, so all bikes will have that. So as long as the bikes are correct, and there's always gonna be people out there manipulating or hacking them or modifying them to go faster, but yeah, it's just something at a higher rate of speed that you might see somebody even on class 1 or 2 going down White Pathway when somebody's normally casually pedaling at 10 miles an hour with their family, somebody's going 20 or 28 miles an hour. So I don't really see it. It's still such a small minority of people. And to be honest with you, it's older folks with level heads on their shoulder and they're not out there being crazy. So, I don't see it as a concern right now, Mike. But as they become more readily available and maybe cheaper and people do stuff with them and modify them, that may be something to consider. You have to post signs that say some mountain bike trails, they say no e-bikes allowed or class 1 e-bikes only. That you police that or? Okay.
Along these lines and with your question, I would be curious to know who would commute on a bike if it was easier
Sure.
presently or in the future. Meaning down the road someday, if we have access to the light, you know, I mean, like that could open up. Because I mean, it seems like you've got 3 types of biking. You've got the exercise, you know, bikers, and then you've got like the riding around with your family or just on your recreational. And then it would be like commuting, right? And I can't wrap my head around what the commuting vibe is in this town. Where would you be commuting to and from?
Well, I mean, your husband rode up to the industrial park all the time, right?
Yeah, like teacher, you know, I'm just thinking like, who is working where?
Although my husband works in the industrial park and he has commuted by bicycle, but it's so unpleasant. Going through like North Main is just so unpleasant, you know, like I think that would maybe increase if that was a more pleasant. It's not, not that he felt unsafe per se, but just, it's not that nice, you know, biking along there.
That might be a really great question to pose. You know,
Yeah.
How many are you that go from River Falls out? And how many are you actually gonna be commuting in or would have the potential to commute in from 5 miles out?
Yeah,
6 miles out, whatever, and just, you can have that as just a real easy survey question. If offered the LTS one.
Right.
Like, for instance, I'm out on County Road E. I think it's a wonderful path that goes all the way out to Happy Valley or double left there, but then it just stops. That went to County Road E. The only reason I don't ride a bike in, I throw my kids in the trailer and ride a bike in, but I don't want to ride down 29. And even County Road E is a little bit busier. I would have to take the back roads, which means lots of hills, and I own a bike shop. I don't ride a bike anymore, so hills are scary to me at times. But yeah, if there was a path like that, I could handle riding down County Road E and then something connectivity, you could run that path all the way to Prescott and then Prescott to Hastings. And Hastings.
It just made that nice road, you might as well just tag on.
Right, there you go. Can you explain, Maria, how is the interactive map? How does it work? Like, do people who have landed here, they interact and then you also ask questions, or what is this?
So, well, the interactive map, we could say, you know, put a dot on where, you know, one of those, like, what we were saying, like the sudden high stress places.
Yeah.
You know, we could ask a question like that and have people, that would be the interactive part, that they could put something on the map instead of saying, oh, over by the school, you know, they could put where it
Can drop a pin or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, but we also have the ability to ask other questions just in kind of a regular survey format, you know, multiple choice or fill in.
Yeah.
That's possible too.
When this becomes available, how do people get to it or find it or get notified when it is? Kind of through the city's social media and website?
So everything's on your
Terrible.
page.
Okay.
That works. So
Yeah,
if you
how do
went
you-
in and created your account.
Yeah, how do you get people to engage and engage?
We've been working on
Give that
that.
step to that.
So we've got almost 400 people now signed up. We've been doing outreach in the community, whether it's presentations at Rotary Lions, those kinds of places. We've been doing Facebook. Right now up is nominate your pet for pet mayor.
Yeah.
I feel like you want to do a TikTok video or something.
It'd be easy for me to push that at the hospital. That's a lot of people.
Sure.
It would be
It
easy
is.
for me to
We've
do
got
that.
business cards with engagement
Yeah.
that I can get you
Yeah.
to hand out.
I would take a stack of those for my front counter too.
Okay,
And then keep pushing
Anybody who
it.
comes in, I give them a receipt and staple that to it or.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
UW is great, but you got transient
Yeah,
population.
totally. Yeah, keep pumping it to university communications because they put it in the daily newsletter. That's how I found out about it. So right? I'm thinking you
Yes,
did.
our communications team is connected with
Yeah.
your communications.
Okay,
team.
perfect. And then you're right, it's a lot of folks who don't live in River Falls, but there are a lot, there's a handful who do.
Cause
A few
I like
hundred.
that, I like that one point when you just looked at a percentage with coronary artery disease, I think is one of the things, and that's what we see. So it'd be a great 1 point thing that connects that healthcare piece to it.
You had a heart attack, check out this website.
While
I
you're
think
patient.
it's from the school district. I don't know if that's something that Jenny
So we had
and Lauren,
pushing stuff there
Okay.
too, but I don't know if it's.
if it's coming through. Yeah, okay.
So the superintendent, Jamie Benson, when he does his like
I
weekly,
was just
Just put it
thinking,
in
would
that.
he be willing to? I could ask him.
yeah, why wouldn't he?
Right.
It's a huge,
No, that's good.
We gotta get him first riding to work from where he lives, which is literally not very far. He hops in there for a quick, within very short distance drive. Just put the heat on
Yeah, there you go.
him.
Some incentives.
and and then each school, I'm assuming, has a newsletter.
Right,
Right?
yeah.
So it's like if Jamie will put it in his.
Yeah.
But it could go in every school.
Yeah.
Newsletter.
Yeah, I'll just reach out to the school secretaries and ask if that's something that they could include. Or should I have them get in touch with somebody here from the communications? Do you wanna, I assume just like a website is not gonna be that compelling, but if there's, graphic, of all of the stuff that you all are promoting with that, is that what you would want in their newsletter?
If you have a contact for us, you can.
Sure.
email me and-
Okay.
So I think it's supposed to go till 8, is that right? I couldn't remember if it was 8 or. But
That next phase, is it I'm just getting a feel for what that's gonna be, like a brainstorm session almost, kind of like that, where you'll have opportunity to, just one in the format of how you'll
yeah.
create that think tank.
Mhm. Well, I think it's open, as far as what you're interested in doing. I guess it depends on the timing of when we have the next meeting. If it, I guess, if we were to have it in like 2 months or something, maybe that's more of a brainstorm meeting. If we needed for some reason for it to be, in 4 months or something, then to keep things moving with the plan, we'd probably draft some recommendations and have you react to them. So we can kind of see how all the pieces are fitting together with the other plans and,
May I add a little bit to this?
yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's the right timing of it, but on April 24th, we have our Earth Fest event, and you get an LED light bulb if you ride your bike or skateboard or
Nice.
walk. But it could be, if we're still in the data collection or you want to get in front of a lot of people, assuming the weather is nice. We're expecting at least 500 people, so it might be slanted because it might be a biker heavy group, but just another opportunity to get in front of a lot of people.
I believe Sam is planning to attend that.
Yep. We're registered, we've got a table.
That's great.
Great. Thank you.
And so you are planning, we'll reschedule the walking tour.
Yeah.
And then you're planning to have a biking tour as well? Okay.
Yeah. So I'll need to work with Sam on exactly how that will shake out.
And then a brainstorming session after the tour, was that your thinking?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Bring your ideas. to it, let us
Combined,
react to
okay.
those.
So we have 2 more of the steering committee meetings. We said we do 4. And the next one will be about recommendations. And I guess, do you all have a preference for if the two options being, we kind of come to that meeting with recommendations developed, so some ideas about the infrastructure improvements and about the education encouragement of part of the recommendations, and then you react to that? Or would you prefer we come with more of a blank slate and you're developing those initial ideas?
I prefer reacting.
Me too. I'm like, I have an immediate preference.
Yes,
and I don't
me
want to see it.
too.
I absolutely would like to react to something right now.
I mean, you might have the majority of it all buttoned down and we don't have to touch it. I think it might be kind of time saving too. It's like bang, 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 you hit on all that, that's perfect. So let's touch base on this stuff. So I would say that route.
I think with the timing, we're gonna
Yes.
have to do that, because then the last meeting will most likely be if there's any shifts that have to happen and the approval process and the recommendation process up. So I guess I was thinking that the engagement piece could be that time for everybody to throw everything on the map and on the wall. So get in, give us the points on the map if we've got, you know, what are the other tools, Emily, where they can just provide comments and.
Yeah, so we might have a forum where people can, you know, actually have conversations with each other. And like, if you say, yep, I'm around the school at this time, it's really horrendous. And then like, people can like that, you know, or agree with it. So, you know, you can kind of get more of that kind of cumulative impact, or people could say, oh yeah, and then that makes me think about this other place. So we can get some narrative comments in there. And then the map, I think, is really helpful for identifying unsafe intersections, places where it's like, oh, I would ride here if, you know, there were these additional facilities, or, you know, here's a place where the sidewalk ends and, you know, and in the street, and, you know, and it's really uncomfortable, you know, or here's a spot where there's this beautiful tree, and if you put a sidewalk here, that tree would be impacted. So, you know, is there some way to work around that? You know, those kind of unique things that we can get information from the community and what they see and experience on a daily basis, and feed that into the other data sources that we've collected so far, and that will validate some things, and it'll also probably pop up some stuff that we haven't seen and needs to be focused on.
Yeah. So I guess the way for you all to contribute in the meantime will be through Engage RF and the questions and map that we put on there. And then when we do our walking and biking tours, we can attend that and provide ideas that way. Then we'll have some draft recommendations to share with you at our next meeting like this that you can react to. Does that sound like a good plan?
Have you guys given much thought to the downtown area and the kinds of solutions that we may have?
Not yet, just looking at the problem so far. But yeah, do you have some initial ideas or any?
Well, we had some initial that came through the Kinney Corridor plan, so I don't know if you guys have taken, I just didn't know if you guys were that far along.
Yeah, well, we'd definitely be looking at the Kinney Corridor plan and any other recent plans and pulling recommendations from that and building on that.
Yeah, good.
That's all I have for you today. Thank you.
So if you're on Engage RF already, when that mapping component comes up, we're gonna blast out an email, so you'll get the notification that it's there, and you can jump in and start playing with it, so.
I think it's just a cool opportunity as we see River Falls kind of string out to these other communities. We're going to see that in the future. It will happen. So to have that connectivity, I like that vision of being able to think out there for that.
Yeah.
But you got to take care of the core first and make it safe. So people.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate all of your insights. You guys have such deep knowledge. It's wonderful to have you for this.
Can I ask a quick question and whoever has the answer, just like a 30-second? The barrier, the existing barriers of just closing down Riverwalk to pedestrian only traffic.
Back
Go.
in the alley? Or,
Yeah, is that Riverwalk or am I? Is that where I go, do I walk here or do I drive
Alley
here?
sounds like what it is.
The
Yeah.
dumpsters, like where would the dumpsters?
Yeah, where do you do?
Unloading industrial businesses.
Right.
Unload their trucks. That's
Yep.
what the problem is.
Really
And there
don't
does-
use that much.
Right.
All my semis, when I get home, they just park right on Main Street. They cover the crosswalks and then.
It's in the kitty corridor plan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
and how long, what's the?
There's some council members that are very interested in that idea, and there's some that are not.
But I think that used to be more of an issue, Ben, like, I mean, when there was like a, you know, the appliance store.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that they would be getting deliveries there, but that's
It
not
just
really.
means especially over like they're talking about.
Right.
And as to your question, like, is it a path, I think DOT is whether it's in part with the road improvement. So like extended shoulders are under DOT transportation in St. Clair County. If it's a dedicated path on the outside of it, that is on local community.
Okay.
So if it's a separate thing, that's where they turn the distinction of whether, and then the maintenance of it, is it public works, parks, or is it city transportation? I don't know if the city has quite the distinction, but I know that that's where they start. Well, we're not paying for it like this, we're not part of the normal plow route.
Sure.
Makes sense.
It's almost so. Well, somebody went to a lot of St. Croix County, like pedestrian plan meetings. That's why you have a lot of it in there, because they have dedicated funding from the St. Croix Crossing Bridge.
Mike? Oh, he's
So there's
raising his hand.
mitigation funds of the St. Croix County Bridge that paid for a lot of that, because when they went across that thing, all of a sudden they had a lot of money they had to spend on connections and park trails and everything else in the Parks Department of St. Clair County. And that's why it's slowly going through St. Joseph Township down to Hudson, coming down the backside of South Cover Trail and down. There was $25,000 as part of the, federal contract that St. Clair County got that money to create a plan.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.